You think you know Father Brown, the gentle priest, the sleepy village, the cozy afternoon murders.
You're tolerant with me.
Oh, Hercules, I've killed Father Brown.
But behind the scenes, this show has been keeping secrets from you for over a decade. A real priest whose knowledge of evil left his own creator speechless. A screen legend who put on the cassock as a costume and took it off a changed man.
I'll teach you such knowledge would be ruinous.
Yeah, but Father, please keep this under your hat. Of course.
A lead actor handed one of British television's biggest roles without a single audition. 10 behind-the-scenes secrets the show never told you. And the final one reveals why Father Brown may never, ever end. The Real Priest. It starts in 1903, when the writer G.K. Chesterton met a small, unremarkable parish priest named Father John O'Connor, because the character was never invented out of thin air. Chesterton, like most people of his time, assumed that a celibate parish priest must be naive about the darker corners of life. Then, in the course of an ordinary conversation, O'Connor revealed an astonishing depth of knowledge about human sin and depravity. Knowledge gathered over years of hearing confessions. The kind of education no university could ever provide. And the lesson was driven home a little later. After O'Connor had left the room, 2 young Cambridge students who had been present praised the priest's fine intellect, but dismissed him as a man inevitably cut off from the grit and crime of the real world. Chesterton nearly laughed out loud. It was the priest who truly understood evil. Compared to him, Chesterton later wrote, the 2 worldly young men knew about as much as a pair of babies sharing the same perambulator. In that contradiction, Chesterton found his detective. Father Brown would appear harmless, common, even faintly foolish, yet possess a profound and unsettling understanding of the criminal mind. The first collection of stories, fittingly titled The Innocence of Father Brown, appeared in 1911, and the formula was locked in from the very first page. Father Brown solves his cases not by examining cigar ash or studying train timetables, but by imagining his way inside the criminal until he can feel, from within, exactly why an ordinary person might be driven to kill. It was a method lifted straight from the confessional that had so unnerved Chesterton. While other detectives studied the crime, Father Brown studied the sinner, and that single quiet innovation made this little priest utterly unlike any detective who came before him. But here is the strange part. If you went looking for Father Brown in the real Father O'Connor, you would never find him. Chesterton made sure of that. A friend disguised. Although Father Brown was modeled on Father O'Connor, Chesterton did something rather mischievous with his friend. He deliberately disguised him. You see, the real O'Connor was an elegant, sharp, well-traveled figure. Chesterton wanted his detective to be the opposite on the surface. Clumsy, shabby, easily overlooked. That way, the gap between outward dowdiness and inner brilliance would hit all the harder. In his autobiography, Chesterton described the process with characteristic humor, explaining that he had taken the liberty of battering his friend's hat and umbrella shapeless, untidying his clothes, and flattening his intelligent face into a kind of pudding-faced vacancy. In short, he had disguised Father O'Connor as Father Brown. But the friendship ran far deeper than literary borrowing. O'Connor was not merely the model for a popular character. He became a genuine spiritual influence on Chesterton's own life. In 1922, it was Father O'Connor himself who received Chesterton into the Roman Catholic Church, formally completing a conversion the writer had been moving toward for years. The real priest gave Chesterton 2 gifts, a beloved fictional detective and his own faith. The man who inspired Father Brown led his creator into the very church that Father Brown serves, and Chesterton would not be the last man changed by this character. Half a century later, the priest's costume itself, just a black cassock and a broad-brimmed hat, would quietly do the same thing to one of the most famous actors alive. The converted actor. Long before the modern BBC series, Father Brown reached the cinema. In 1954, Alec Guinness, one of the finest actors Britain ever produced, took the part in a film simply titled Father Brown. And while shooting on location in France, something happened that Guinness never forgot. Before we get there, if you're enjoying these secrets, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep making documentaries like this one, and it means you'll never miss the stories behind the shows you love. Now, picture the scene. Guinness is walking back to his lodgings one evening, still dressed in the priest's black cassock, when a local child approaches him. Mistaking him for a real priest, the boy trustingly takes his hand and walks along beside him, chattering away happily. Guinness spoke very little French. He could not explain that he was merely an actor in costume, so he simply walked with the child until the boy skipped off home. Nothing dramatic happened. No words were exchanged that either of them would remember. Yet the moment moved Guinness profoundly. He later reflected that a church capable of inspiring such instinctive trust in a child, making even an unknown priest so easily approachable, could not possibly be the scheming, sinister institution he had been raised to suspect. It began to dissolve prejudices he had carried his entire life. Around the same time, Guinness's young son Matthew was struck down with polio, and the anxious father began quietly slipping into a small Catholic church to pray. The two experiences together set him on a path that ended some years later in his own conversion to Catholicism. Guinness would go on to become one of the most celebrated film actors in the world, immortalized for a later generation as the wise Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. Yet he spoke of his faith as one of the most important things in his life, and it had begun, in part, with a borrowed cassock and the trusting hand of a child who simply believed he was the real thing. No audition needed. The modern Father Brown is, of course, Mark Williams, an actor you already know from very different roles. To a generation of children, he is Arthur Weasley, the kindly wizard father from the Harry Potter films. To comedy fans, he is one of the anarchic minds behind The Fast Show. He even appeared opposite Glenn Close in 101 Dalmatians. What almost nobody knows is how casually he landed the role that may now come to define him. Williams was away in Northern Ireland filming another BBC series, the comedy Blandings, when his agent telephoned with news that the corporation had offered him a part. Given his track record, he assumed he was being cast as some villain or murderer. Instead, he was told he would be playing Father Brown himself, the lead in a brand new detective series. There had been no audition at all, no screen test, no lengthy negotiation. One of the longest-running lead roles in modern British television changed hands over a single phone call to a set in Northern Ireland. Williams has said he knew instantly what to do with the character, just as he had known instantly how to play Mr. Weasley. He simply understood the man, the gentleness, the watchfulness, the deceptive ordinariness. He stepped straight into the cassock, and that instinctive certainty has paid off spectacularly. More than a decade later, Williams is not only still playing the priest, he has been made an executive producer of the series, his creative fingerprints now all over a show he took on, more or less on the strength of a single phone call. And what that phone call set in motion, nobody saw coming. Not Williams, not the BBC, nobody. Global juggernaut. Father Brown occupies a famously unglamorous slot in the television schedule. It is a daytime drama broadcast in the afternoon, the sort of gentle programming often dismissed as background viewing. Nobody involved expected it to become a worldwide phenomenon. It did anyway. Since it began in 2013, the series has grown into the most successful British daytime drama of its era. By its most recent runs, it had produced more than 140 episodes across 13 series, with more already commissioned. In Britain, it has drawn peak audiences of well over 2 million viewers, an extraordinary figure for an afternoon slot. But its real triumph has been overseas. Father Brown has been sold to more than 150 countries, building large and devoted followings in the United States, Australia, Canada, and far beyond. Think about that for a moment. A quiet afternoon drama about a 1950s village priest outperforming glossy primetime productions on the international market. American and Australian fans now make pilgrimages to the filming locations. Reporters have flown in from as far away as Italy simply to interview its star. Williams has been refreshingly honest about how unexpected all of this was. He once recalled asking a Harry Potter producer whether anyone had expected to make all 8 films, and the answer was a flat no. "You set out," Williams observed, "with nothing more than hope and good storytelling. But here is what makes the numbers stranger still. The show's global reach is nothing next to the character's hidden influence. Because long before television, this little priest quietly shaped one of the most famous detectives ever written, and almost nobody knows it, shaping Miss Marple. Somewhere in England, a young Agatha Christie is reading Chesterton's stories, and what she finds in them will echo through everything she writes. Before Father Brown, the great fictional detectives tended to be obvious geniuses. Brilliant, eccentric, visibly clever men like Sherlock Holmes, whose intellect announced itself the instant they walked into a room. Chesterton, the self-styled Prince of Paradox, did precisely the opposite. He made his detective seem the least likely sleuth imaginable, a shabby, awkward, unremarkable little clergyman whom criminals never thought to fear simply because he appeared so harmless. When Christie sat down to create Miss Marple, that idea was waiting for her. The gentle elderly spinster whose fluffy exterior conceals a razor-sharp grasp of human wickedness is widely credited as a direct descendant of Chesterton's invention. The disarmingly innocuous detective whom everyone underestimates. The entire tradition of the unassuming amateur who quietly outwits the professionals owes a great deal to that pudding-faced priest. And here's the part that would have amused Chesterton himself. He never treated Father Brown as his life's work. He wrote essays, novels, poetry, and theology, and thought of himself first and foremost as a journalist. The little priest was almost a sideline. Yet it is that sideline, conjured from a real friend and a clever paradox, that has outlived very nearly everything else he ever produced. The character refused to stay small. And as you're about to see, the village he now haunts refused to stay quiet. Deadly Little Village. The fictional village of Kembleford, where Father Brown solves his seemingly endless stream of murders, is one of the most charming settings on British television. All honey-colored stone, church bells, and rolling green hills. It is also entirely real, though it goes by a different name in everyday life. The series is filmed in and around Blockley, a genuine village deep in the Cotswolds. The local church of Saints Peter and Paul stands in for Father Brown's St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church, while the village vicarage became the priest's 1950s presbytery. Visitors traveling through the region recognize street after street directly from the show. Blockley itself is tiny. A few hundred homes, a village shop, a bowling green, which makes the show's central conceit all the funnier once you notice it. If the body count of Kembleford were taken literally, this tiny, peaceful Cotswold community would have one of the highest murder rates anywhere on Earth. A sleepy idyll where, week after week, someone meets a sticky end among the roses and the tea things. That contrast is precisely the appeal. The prettiness makes the murder palatable. The violence never quite disturbs the warmth. And the real Blockley has reaped the rewards, becoming a destination for fans from all over the world. But the village is not the biggest illusion in the show. Not even close. The people standing around Father Brown, the faces you have watched for years, are hiding a secret of their own. An invented family. You know the warm ensemble by heart, the formidable parish secretary Mrs. McCarthy, the glamorous aristocrat Lady Felicia, her roguish chauffeur, Sid, and the long-suffering local police inspector, forever exasperated by the meddling priest. What most viewers never realize is that almost none of them exist in Chesterton's original stories at all. Chesterton's Father Brown tales are, for the most part, spare and self-contained. The priest, a particular crime, and very little in the way of a permanent supporting cast. When the BBC came to adapt them, the producers faced a practical problem. A short story does not easily stretch to fill a 45-minute episode, week after week, year after year. Their solution was to build Father Brown an entire community. A gang of recurring helpers and foils, invented expressly for the screen, giving the writers far more ways to tell their stories. It also gave audiences something Chesterton never provided, a family to come home to, week after week, whose small dramas and rivalries carry the show between the murders. There is one major exception. The dashing master criminal Flambeau, Father Brown's great adversary and occasional reluctant ally, is genuinely Chesterton's own creation. He appears in the very first BBC episode, based on one of Chesterton's most famous stories, The Blue Cross, and he recurs throughout the series, a real thread of the original, woven through a largely new tapestry. So, the world of the television Father Brown is a clever hybrid. A real priest, real source stories, and a real arch-enemy surrounded by a much-loved family that sprang almost entirely from the imaginations of modern scriptwriters. A century of Browns. Picture a broad-brimmed black hat passed from head to head for nearly 100 years. That is the strange afterlife of Father Brown, because Mark Williams is only the latest actor to wear it. The character first appeared in print in 1910 in the pages of magazines, and Chesterton would write 53 Father Brown stories in all between then and his death in 1936. Hollywood came calling early. An American film, Father Brown, Detective, appeared in 1934. Then the hat passed to Alec Guinness for his celebrated version in 1954. West German television claimed it in the 1960s, placing it on the much-loved comic actor Heinz Rühmann. In 1974, Kenneth More wore it for a British series on ITV. The character has even lived on radio, voiced over the years by actors including Andrew Sachs. Different faces, different accents, different decades. The same shabby hat and the same quiet insight underneath it. Each generation, it seems, has wanted its own Father Brown, a humble priest who solves crimes through faith and insight rather than fists or forensics, somehow never dates. And Mark Williams's version, running since 2013, has now comfortably outlasted all of them in sheer volume, making him for modern audiences the definitive screen Father Brown. But longevity alone does not explain any of this. Why does this one character refuse to die when 100 flashier detectives have come and gone? The answer is the final secret, and it has been hiding in plain sight in every single episode. The Cozy Rebellion. Father Brown arrived on screen at a curious moment. Television crime drama was being dominated by a wave of bleak, violent, brilliantly grim Scandinavian thrillers. Shows full of brutal murders, broken detectives, and long, dark nights of the soul. Father Brown went, quite deliberately, in the opposite direction. Where the fashionable dramas offered despair, Father Brown offered warmth, gentle pacing, beautiful countryside, eccentric villagers, and at the center of it all, a priest who believes, above everything else, that no soul is ever truly beyond redemption. There is crime, certainly, but the tone is fundamentally kind. The show's faith in human goodness is as much a part of its identity as the murders it solves. Williams has put his finger on exactly why this works for a global audience. People watch the dark, harrowing dramas and admire them, he has observed. And then, more often than not, they would simply rather be cheered up. In an anxious and noisy world, a program that combines a satisfying puzzle with genuine comfort turns out to be enormously valuable. And this is the secret that explains why the show may never end. Cozy does not mean shallow. Beneath the tea in the hedgerows, the show quietly wrestles with guilt, forgiveness, and redemption in almost every episode. It simply refuses to punish you while doing so. Darkness dates. Grim thrillers burn bright and vanish with the fashion that made them. But the need for a satisfying puzzle wrapped in genuine human warmth never goes away, which is why, more than a decade in, with new series still being commissioned, an executive producer credit for its leading man, and a successful spin-off in the Sister Boniface mysteries, the gentle priest of Kembleford shows no sign of hanging up his cassock. As long as the world stays noisy and anxious, there will be an audience waiting in Kembleford. That is the real secret of Father Brown. It was never built for a moment. It was built to last. If you enjoyed uncovering these secrets, hit that subscribe button so you never miss the hidden stories behind television's most beloved shows. And tell us in the comments which Father Brown secret surprised you the most, and which classic series should we dig into next.